that old familiar sound, and that means we are back with another episode of the North Georgia Sports Report. Will Cooper and Art Mosley bringing it to you here on a beautiful Wednesday. Art, how are you doing today, my friend?
Coop, I said it once, I'll say it again. If I was any better, I would have to be twins. It is like the Christmas Eve of high school football here as we sit at the precipice, beginning of the season here. And we've got a couple of games being played tonight, actually, getting us started for the 2025 season. We know we've got the Corky Kell kicking off tomorrow as we record. Tomorrow will be Thursday. And also a big one over in Beaufort as the Beaufort Wolves host a Class 5A state champ Milton Eagles as they open up their new stadium. Just about every high school who's playing in week one around the state will get kicked off on Friday night, this coming Friday, including our Cherokee County teams that we're here to talk about. And then finally, culminating, with the Corky Kell games in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Saturday, a slate of four great games that folks should tune in if they so desire.
Absolutely. Those games are live stream on the Atlanta News First, something or another. You can go to their Twitter account, Facebook account, find it. But you can get all those games live for free on your streaming device, or if you do have a standard cable line, you can watch those there as well. And I agree with you, partner. Look, it's the most exciting time of the year. This is the stuff that you and I and guys like us, we spend, the last 8 months talking about. Really, since the season ends, we kind of start looking forward. And here we are once again. So very excited to be back with you. Of course, we did get the opportunity to interview all 6 of our county coaches on last week's show. So if you didn't check that out, make sure you go over and check that out. It'll be on our YouTube channel as well as on any of our other pages. So if you're on iTunes and you like Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, I should say, we have it there. Or if you're on Amazon, there's tons of them. Wherever you get your podcasts, we're on. And if not, let me know and I'll put it on there.
Hey, where all the finer podcasts are posted to.
That's
where
right.
You'll find us.
There you go. So we appreciate everybody joining us for the video version or the audio version. And since we interviewed all 6 last week, we decided to give them a break this week. We'll be back with our weekly coach interviews starting next week, of course. But we do want to jump into the action this week because we've got 2 inter-county games. We got 2 games with our county teams that are going to be playing out of county. And of course, we've got all the scrimmages to look back on. So we've got a fully packed show. We've got a better idea of who's going to be starting, who's going to be playing. And Art, I think we're finally getting a little bit of a picture of where these teams might line up before we get into the real answers in week 1.
Yeah, Coop, at least we have more of an idea of who's going to at least line up where. I think when we get to results, that certainly has we've got a long way to go before we see that. And this is, week 1 of 12 regular season weeks. Each team will play 10 games, certainly. But especially in Region 6A, 5A, the teams in Region 6 will have 3 non-region tune-up games before region play starts. And then I believe there are 4 non-region tune-up games for Region 6A. So I'm going to get 6A and 5A mixed up. I'm still getting used to the lack of Class 7 here in Georgia for the second year in a row, and looks like going forward. But in any event, yeah. So we're talking. We won't call it preseason, but it's pre-region, and I think it's important. While you say we got to get answers, I think these coaches have about 3 to 4 weeks before they really, I don't want to say it gets real because it gets real Friday night, but I think in terms of region play and for all those teams with postseason aspirations, and I'd have to imagine all 6 of our county teams have postseason aspirations that, hey, they want to go out and have a good showing this week and continue to build upon it. But if it doesn't work out, I think you get some answers. They might not be the answers you want, but at least you have some answers and know where to go from there.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. I think that's something that the coaches have, I don't want to say a luxury of because it's true across the board, but, when you get down to the meat and potatoes of the schedule, what you do in the first 3-4 games for our teams, it's not that it doesn't matter. Like you said, it goes on the official record. But if you finish the season with a winning record in the region, then it's not going to affect your playoff spot at all. It's more for them to understand where they line up. You get a better idea of where all of these teams are in comparison to either teams in a higher classification or a similar one, or they sometimes try and find teams that differ in styles to prepare them for that region schedule. So, a lot of important things to talk about, a lot of important things to break down, and we're excited to be bringing it to you here. And we appreciate you all taking the time to be with us tonight. So, Art, with that being said, let's jump right into it, my friend. For anyone who doesn't know, how we do this is we go in alphabetical order. We'll review what happened last week. So we'll kind of include the last 2 weeks since there are some scrimmages that were played a couple of weeks ago, but we'll lump them into one. And then we will preview the games for Friday night, and that'll get you all prepared for everything you need to know before you make your way out to those games on Friday. So, with that being said, we'll start with the Cherokee Warriors, who had their scrimmage against Creekview last week. Art, I watched the game. I think for Cherokee, I should say, I think we kind of got to see a little bit of their new style. They were definitely more run first than they had been in the past. We got to see Sawyer Ray in a starting role. Obviously, the scrimmage doesn't count as an official start, but for all intents and purposes, it does. A few names stood out to me right off the board. First one's Brandon Hamilton. This was a guy that we talked to Coach Holly about last week on the podcast. He had told us that running back room was coming a long way. Brandon Hamilton had a 80-yard touchdown run and then followed it up with another big run on the right next drive and just couldn't take it to the house just because when you run 80 yards on, literally 4 plays ago because Creekview punted, it was a 3 and out. He had to be right back on the field and was off to the races again. I think this is a Cherokee team that right now, from what I saw in the scrimmage, their defense looked pretty good. The defensive line held up. I didn't think Creekview overpowered them up front. They weren't super successful in running the football, especially up the middle. So for all of that being said, Cherokee right now, I think they're in an interesting spot. Much like we talked about, there's a lot of unknowns going into their season. But I think from what we've seen out of them, at least out of the scrimmage, I do like where they're headed. And I think their offense is going to look much different than we saw last year.
Yeah, Coop, you mentioned Brandon Hamilton. We saw flashes of him early in the season last season. And really, I thought kind of had a breakout game against Sequoia. We just noticed his game-breaking speed. Interested to see how and when they'll use Jelion Trowers as well in that offense. And we know with a sophomore starting quarterback in Sawyer Ray, who's taken his first snaps on Friday nights. And there's no substitute for that. I think it might have been Coach Holly that mentioned that in the podcast last week. There's no substitute for that Friday night experience. So you've got to think that that the Warriors will really lean on that run game, at least in the first part of the season, while some of those younger receivers develop. They've got a couple of good offensive linemen. I think they look like bookends. I think it's Dorian Stewart and Nation Farmer up there at tackles that have at least look the part of a solid foundation for that offensive line. We'll have to see how that whole entire unit progresses. I mean, it's great to have one or two studs, but that offensive line is probably the most integral part that needs to be in sync on the offense, at least. And if they can come together, I think they'll allow Sawyer Ray to have a little bit more time in the pocket, maybe get his feet underneath them. I think the game is just so fast. When you're making a leap from sub-varsity ball to varsity ball, then it's just growing pains. He will be much better in week 4 than he is in week 1, and he'll be better in week 8 than he is in week 4. And that's just the natural progression of growth. And that quarterback and so much relies on that position. So excited to see what the Warriors have in store. Coop, I thought, and we talked about this before the show, Cherokee's defense was a little better than we thought it might be at this point in the season.
Yeah, I thought so. Just watching them on the tape, it seemed like they handled what Creekview was trying to do, which we'll break down the Grizzlies a little bit later in the show. But, Creekview kind of staying with that similar option style spread. It's kind of hard to nail down exactly what it is. There are multiple formation, but a lot of quarterback runs and a lot of options in the, running game in particular. I thought they handled it incredibly well. Again, Creekview could not run up the middle from what I saw very well, which says a lot about your interior defensive linemen. And then, we talked about the linebackers a little bit with, guys like Case and Simmons that have developed so much. And then, you got Elijah Fute in the back. I feel like Cherokee has the pieces to have a really good defense this year. We really saw the starters for, a half and then one drive coming out of that scrimmage. So, obviously we don't get a ton of information on them, but I thought they did a good job. And I want to go back to something you said about Sawyer Ray. This is a group that I noticed when watching the offensive line. They ran the ball incredibly well in the middle. The interior runs were very good for Cherokee. The pass blocking was a bit of an issue. Now, whether that's because Creekview has really good defensive linemen, and that's something that Coach Williams told us he felt very strongly about, was that they did have a group of guys that they could rotate in there. Fair enough, but that's something that Cherokee will have to improve on over the course of the season. So, as important as it is for Sawyer to get more comfortable, and I agree, there were times that you could see that inexperience show up. I think it's also important for that offensive line to gel with becoming a pass blocking group more than just the run blockers, because I think they got the run blocking looks really good right now. It's just the pass blocking is something that I think they're going to have to work on and develop. So, all of that being said, Cherokee's offense, I think that it has the opportunity to be a really good group. But to your point, you're going to get 3-4 games out of region, and starts with River Ridge this week. River Ridge has a pretty good defense coming in there. I think it's going to be a big test for them to see how they handle a group with experienced linebackers up front that are going to be able to kind of blitz when they need to and bring some different pressures and how they communicate that. So there'll be a lot of different looks that Cherokee sees this week, but overall, I liked what I saw out of the scrimmage. I think it kind of aligns with what Coach Holly was talking to us about with that new identity they were looking for. And I feel very strongly that if they develop that running game and they continue to do that well, then the play action pass builds off of that, and they'll be able to get Sawyer some looks and a little bit more comfort in there to hopefully develop him as he gets through these first few games where you have those jitters as a sophomore does.
Yeah, no further analysis on my part, Coop. I think you hit the nail on the head there. And again, something that we will certainly be looking at and looking for as the season progresses is the growth of that offensive line. Like you said, their ability to pass block. And hey, it's a long season. Week 1, and they've got the team they play will be up to the task. We know for sure. We'll talk about them momentarily, but Coop, that's our Cherokee segment. Is what do you say we move on to preview Creekview?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Or review
Creekview's next.
Creekview rather.
Right. Yeah, going back to talk about Creekview from their perspective of the scrimmage. Again, I kind of mentioned this in the Cherokee segment, but I felt like Creekview was sticking to their guns in terms of their offensive play design. A lot of bootlegs to the near sideline, deep passes, and a lot of running. Obviously Penrod taking over at quarterback. He's an athletic guy. We saw him all over the field last year along with his brother. So Alex and Austin are both guys that we've seen moved around offensively and defensively. I felt like it was more of the same. The one thing that surprised me with Creekview was that they rotated a lot of running backs in. There were about 3 or 4 guys that we saw come in for running back when the starters were in for Creekview. That gives them plenty of depth. And, knowing that Coach Williams and that offensive staff feels like they have the depth that they can go to, where if they need to hand the ball off 30, 40 times a game, they have fresh legs that can do that. And when when you've run down a defense and you're getting to that fourth quarter and you bring in a back that's only got 7 carries, that helps a ton with those fresh legs. So that impressed me. Defensively, I thought the secondary looked really good. Cherokee tried to get some passes off, and they were defended well. That's something that we've come to know from a Coach Williams-led team, is that the secondary plays incredibly well. I felt like that was true. And then I'll tell you the thing that surprised me the most, and Coach Williams mentioned it, but that was the defensive line. I mean, they really, really got after Sawyer Ray from time to time. So, if Creekview has that kind of pass rush against other teams, they could be a very, very good defensive team. And kind of like he said, a la 2021, which would be great to see for Creekview fans. So there's a lot to like about Creekview. I think that really putting it all together, it's been a couple of seasons since we felt like we've seen Creekview put it all together, where they had the defense that was there and then the offense was able to take advantage of those opportunities. So hopefully they can put it all together, because they got a big test coming up week 1.
A huge test, as you mentioned, Coop. Creekview running backs. You talk about Mason Munn. We know about him. Travis Vine's another one. And certainly that's a young man who has a pedigree. His dad played basketball down at Georgia Tech, so certainly athletic pedigree. And then Carson Lott, I think, is a name that Coach Williams brought up as well, who was exciting. I know in the his sub varsity time last season, and has a chance now to step up into varsity action. And really, I think when you build depth at that position, as Coach Williams talked about, wanting that we see Mason Munn on both sides of the ball playing linebacker and running back. I think when you have a guy like Carson Lott, uh, uh, um, Vines, and then if you throw in another one, they've got another young one, Elijah Kawa. Those type players certainly have an opportunity to carry the load and running back by committee. So we might not see 1,000-yard rusher for Creekview, but I think what you end up with this season is probably one with 700 yards, one with 500, and maybe one with 300. And Creekview can get back to their kind of smash mouth football and then popping a few passes here and there. Perhaps Coach Williams not wanting to show the entire offensive repertoire, and Coach Page over there at offensive coordinator might not want to show the entire playbook there in the scrimmage. But I can imagine Penrod does have the ability to get that ball downfield, and I would also venture to guess that his brother Austin Penrod, when he lines up at receiver, might be one of his primary targets. Certainly excited to see Derek Mizak to get involved in the offense. I know Coach Williams was high on him as well. You talked about their offensive line, and that's a group that, again, similar to Cherokee, has not played a lot of varsity snaps together as a unit. You lost a lot. Creekview's lost a lot of their offensive line over the last couple of seasons. A lot of experience, all region players. 2 years ago, we know Rosinski, Sears, Mears, and I'm forgetting a couple of other names here. And then last year, you had Fernando Zarita, and then guys like that. So it's just been a lot of attrition. They do have Sully back, Ryan Sullivan on that left tackle side, and one of the strongest guys I think in Creekview program history there. And they've got guys like Journey Cowart, but they just don't have as many varsity reps together as a unit. I think that's important. And again, that's what these the scrimmages for. That's what these pre-region games are for. And I think they'll get better if they can establish that run. I think this is a dangerous football team. We've seen it, I think, all throughout Creekview's history, even prior to Coach Williams, even going back to before Coach Carter, and even back to Coach Morrill. Running the football has been an integral part of the success of this program for their 21-year history, or however long they've been playing football. So if they can get to that, I think they'll be fine. As you mentioned, pleasantly surprised by their defensive front and their secondary, I would say as expected. We thought this might be a strength of that defense, and at least in the scrimmage, they showed up and showed out.
Yeah, and you mentioned Carson Lott. He was somebody that I saw get a good bulk of the carries in the scrimmage. So I think that's somebody they're looking to rely on there. And I think your point about the offensive line is 100% correct. I've made this point on our podcast for the last couple of seasons. Schools tend to have areas they excel in, it's odd, but it works somehow. But, think about it. Cherokee's kind of known for their quarterbacks, A.J. Swan, Tanner Savasier, right? Creekview's been known for their offensive line, Nick Penley, John Williams, you mentioned Brzezinski. I mean, these are all guys that, had offers and played Power 4, Power 5 at the time, football. And I think when you kind of look at Creekview's nature, they are a smash mouth football team. They've never really had that game-breaking receiver. They've had some great ones along the way, but they've never had that guy that's that, they never had a Grant Hollier.
Right.
They've never had somebody you can just throw it up to and know he's going to bring it down most of the time. So they have been a running team. Even back in the days, 2018, Radham was there. I mean, that was, just turn around and hand the ball off and run through somebody's face the entire time. I think we're kind of getting back to what the kids call joyless murder ball. Of turn around and hand the ball off and make it miserable for everyone, and we're going to enjoy the fact that it's miserable. I think that's where Creekview thrives. You mentioned, Alex and Austin, having that connection. Yeah, we saw Austin split out wide a couple times. I think he caught a couple of passes in the scrimmage there. Some of the shorter routes, but and to your point, Alex just aired it out a couple of times. Now it didn't necessarily work, but it stretches the defense, right? It's knowing that on 2nd and 4 they could just go 30 yards down the field over your head. So if you're a corner, if you're a safety, you're kind of trying to play the run. And even those shots that don't necessarily work, they do work in your mind of knowing you got to take a step back instead of coming up to approach the run. So I think for me, I kind of wish that they had played more so that I could get a better idea of what
Sure.
it was going on, because the first few drives for Creekview, and I think anybody that watched the game or even the coaching staff would tell you this, they looked like they had nerves. You could tell that there were a lot of new faces on that team, and they were trying to gel, and then they did towards the end of the half. They really did. Um, so I think overall, this is a group that I feel can grow. I think much like we said about Cherokee, hopefully week 1 is not what we see week 4, week 5 when they open up the region play, and hopefully they're able to develop a little bit. Because overall, from what I saw, they seem like a good team, and I think their offensive line did their job. But getting to that next level where you can compete with the Sequoias, the River Ridges, the Woodstocks that we've kind of seen, Sprayberry in there in that region, they're going to need to be just a little bit better than they were at scrimmage time. Which obviously there's a reason it's a scrimmage and not a real Friday night game, because we don't know what the coaches were, you know, as you mentioned, Coach Page, you don't know if there's a blocking scheme that he's withholding to save it for Calhoun, or if there's a certain number of plays that he's got saved for when they get into region schedule. So we might be looking at a very bare bones, just run of the mill style offense that runs about 15, 20 plays and avoids the depth of the playbook. But I do think that the pieces are there, and I think Creekview's probably a little bit better than what people thought they were coming into this year, is what I would say. It's certainly that way for me. They looked better than what I thought they would look heading into the scrimmage.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Coop. I think we because of as we mentioned, the graduation of the last couple of years of just the experience, we had a lot more question marks. But it looks like they will be ready to answer the bell come Friday night up at Calhoun, and we'll talk about that game momentarily. But no further assessment on Creekview. I'm cautiously optimistic. I think this could be a sneaky good team.
I agree. I think that's, if you had to give it a label, it'd be Creekview. Cautiously optimistic would be our our North Georgia Sports Network take of seeing Creekview coming out of summer camp and then into the fall scrimmage. So, but that takes us right into the Etowah Eagles, my friend, who maybe had the most shocking results out of all of the scrimmages that we saw by beating River Ridge. They did win the game overall, but they were also up 21-14 when the starters were pulled. So watching the game, it wasn't pretty half for anybody. I counted, I think there were 7 total turnovers between the two teams. As a matter of fact, I think there was one where Etowah threw an interception and then River Ridge fumbled it back to them. And, you just like they were just living in between for a while. So, but overall, Etowah looks to be kind of, and this isn't surprising knowing that Coach Vavra brought, a lot of his staff over from Sprayberry, but they're following a lot of what we saw Sprayberry do last year. They're running more wide. They're about 4 wide receivers split out on each set. They hand the ball off, and it's usually an outside read. And then as far as seeing Zeke Douglas, kind of command the offense, I thought he did a good job. I think that, River Ridge did get a pass rush fairly consistently, which is something that Coach Vavra told us, that his offensive line was probably a little bit undersized from where they would like it to be, but that with some experience and some learning curve, they can get there. I think we saw that on full display. I think if there's one thing that you would like to see from Etowah coming out of that was their physicality, which, Coach Vavra talked to us a lot about last week, was reestablishing physicality and making a new way for yourself. I thought they did that tremendously. I thought that they were very physical. Defense was flying around all over the place. I thought that it was a really impressive group on defense. River Ridge obviously got theirs. They had a couple of big runs. They had some successful passing plays. But overall, I thought the Eagles did a good job of establishing that, and it showed up on the scoreboard. Again, and with the end of quote unquote regulation for a scrimmage with the starters up 21-14, I think that surprised a lot of us, including me who watched it.
Yeah, Coop, I know you were feeding us score updates on and that game, and we're, I think in our text thread we were all a little shocked by the updates. I think more than anything for Etowah, it's the scrimmage. Ultimately, the results of that are meaningless. But I think more than anything, their ability to compete uh, in that scrimmage, I think, rings volumes for them, and it kind of sets the tone for, okay, we can be successful. We don't have to go 0-10 or 3-7 or 2-8 again this year. We're ready to compete right now, day one, for Coach Favre, and I think that's very important to come out and have a good showing. As you mentioned, it's going to be sloppy early. I think that's to be expected, and that might be a common theme. Coop, the teams that win in week one turn the ball over the least. Or capitalize the most on the turnovers when the defense gets a takeaway here. So I was pleasantly surprised by the result there for Etowah, in terms of their ability to compete immediately, like you said, to be physical, flying around the football. All those things I think are a sign that program is headed for brighter days. We'll certainly talk about their opponent and their upcoming game this week, because they're going to be involved in a dandy on Friday night. It will be our game of the week, and we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later in the podcast. But a very pleasant, like I said, I'll reiterate, pleasantly surprised by the Etowah Eagles. And I think Coach Vavra has this program, this team moving in the right direction. And it certainly does help when you have a returning quarterback, regardless of what happened last season, a guy who understands now what it's like on a Friday night in the state of Georgia as a starting quarterback. And Zeke Douglas is, I think, prepared and ready to make that next step as a starter.
I agree. I think that, and we've seen that, right? I think we just got done talking about Cherokee and Creekview, who are starting new quarterbacks this year. And I think that when you look at how Zeke handled the pressure, now there was again, he was running a lot. And you could tell a couple of times he got frustrated by the two-hand touch rule in scrimmages, because he's an athletic guy and he's pretty big. I think without looking at it, I think he's about 6'1", 6'2", 190, somewhere in there. So for a junior and somebody that's more of that prototypical pocket passer, he's a physical guy, and you can tell that sometimes he's like, I don't think this guy could have tackled me there, but he got a hand on him, so it's blown dead. But yeah, I mean, we talked at length in the open show about Zeke Douglas and Walker Hughes and Kane Moss defensively, and some of these guys that we've got to know over the past couple of years by way of injury. I think it's time for them to take the reins and say, we no longer have to feel like we're the bench warmer. We no longer have to feel like we're holding the reins for someone, and the comparisons can be done. Right, we can be done talking about, how does he compare to Reese Weir? How does he compare to Xavier Mahoney? How does he compare to Vinny Passini? We can be done with those comparisons, and we can take a fresh look at this team. And I think from a fresh perspective, you can tell that they're hungry. You can tell that they're tired of being that team that everybody says, okay, here comes 2-8 Etowah or 3-7 Etowah that we've seen for the last couple of years. So obviously it's a big game coming up this Friday. It's kind of the one that, we always talk about with rivalries in county. You take the records and throw them out. And anything that you would have saved, like we talked about Creekview sometimes saving some things in the playbook, I don't think that's really going to happen this week with Etowah. I think if there's something that they think will work, they will do it, because there would be no bigger way to introduce yourself to Cherokee County than for Coach Vavra to go in and win that game. Now, obviously, he coached at Etowah before, but as a head coach, and then I think for those players, it'd be a huge confidence boost knowing that you beat a team that went to the playoffs and was the third seed, didn't just sneak in. Woodstock was comfortably in that position last year in that region in 5A. So I like where Etowah's at. I think there's a lot to be excited about. My big question for them is just, how does that offensive line hold up, especially over the course of an entire game and playing a larger defensive line that they will face on Friday.
Coop, you talked about offensive line. I think that's a position that every school in the county, almost every school in the county, has question marks over, and how quickly will those units develop? Will certainly, especially these teams with the young or inexperienced quarterbacks coming in here, the offensive line will be key, and again, how soon they develop. So things to keep an eye on. We'll certainly keep an eye on that offensive line for the Etowah Eagles, Coop. But until then, and until we talk about their preview, let's move right along to the River Ridge Knights.
Yeah, the River Ridge Knights, since we just talked about what they did on the back end of that scrimmage from their perspective, I felt like it was kind of the River Ridge that we're used to seeing outside of the score. They ran the ball fairly well. They passed the ball pretty well. Obviously, Hunter Lockerman's taking over for Ethan Spector. As we've talked about with a lot of the other teams, having a new starter is difficult. There's a lot of jitters. I think we saw that with Hunter. One thing I liked from Hunter a lot watching him was that he didn't try and run the ball when he got in pressure situations. He was very good about backing out of the pocket and extending the play, especially with River Ridge, who has a history of having good receivers. As that group kind of grows with him, that's one that you feel like that improvisation can lend to big plays. We used to see that with Carson Latham back in 2020
Yeah.
and then Ethan Spector the last couple of years. So I think that's great coaching. You don't need your quarterback to necessarily be your running back, especially in River Ridge's scheme. You got 2, 3 really good running backs that can do that for you. So, when we call a pass play, let's try and get it downfield. Um, defensively, we saw some of the same linebacking group that we had seen in Matthew Burdett. We've seen this in Wyatt McCarty. We've seen some of these guys for the last few years. We saw them return. What I would say is where Etowah got their big wins on offense was from passing the ball and getting it downfield deep. So the secondary, and we kind of knew this, the secondary was going to be one that we were going to have to look at and see with River Ridge because that's something that they were replacing a lot of talent on the back end for the Knights. So they did get burned a couple of times there. The defensive line performed pretty well. I would say overall, I would have been happy with it as a Knights fan. So I think that what you have to look at with River Ridge is you trust the scheme, you trust the coaching staff, you trust the players. It's just where do they develop into that? Because it's kind of the same story with the other teams we've talked about. There's so much youth right now on this team that we got to find how they all mesh together. And it doesn't look like anybody's necessarily plug and play. They got to kind of develop as they go along. So I don't think it was a bad performance. Again, I know they lost. I know that it didn't seem like they should have as against an Etowah team that's had its fits and starts, but it's a scrimmage. It's fine. You're going to play Cherokee this week that will kind of open up some of those questions. But overall, that was my take on the Knights.
Yeah, Coop, you talked about kind of getting acclimated to the game in a team that lost 2,400 yard passer, their top two receivers. It's a lot to ask of them offensively. Guys that have maybe taken a few varsity snaps, but certainly probably none in any pressure moments under the lights where they are the guy or the guys. So I think that will take some time. You mentioned Lockerman, maybe a little happy feedback there a little bit. I think that's to be expected. Again, similar to what we talked about with Sawyer Ray, the game will slow down for him eventually, and he will turn into I'm sure he'll turn into the next very good, solid River Ridge quarterback, or what at least the play we've come to expect from River Ridge quarterbacks. One of the things I did want to touch on, Coop, and Coach Collins touched on this last week when we spoke to him. He said we got to run the ball better. I went back and crunched the numbers: 621 yards and 5 TDs for Camden Cox and Micah Pugh. Now that wasn't their entire rushing production, but for those two guys, especially Cox coming off of a 1,000-yard rushing season, and explosiveness we've seen from Micah Pugh was a little bit underwhelming when I looked at those statistics, and which played right into what Coach Collins was getting at, and can River Ridge again. It starts, I think, with their offensive line. I know a guy I feel like whose name that we've been calling for River Ridge for a long, long time now is Tomas Perez up front on that offensive line. And again, I think you talked about it last week, but we had seen there was been a couple of times where River Ridge went through a season or a spell where they were producing top level offensive linemen similar to what Creekview was, and not that that's by any, they can only play who shows up at the high school, right? So it's not like
Right.
they're cutting these guys. They're just not. You just don't find a whole lot of 6'5", 280 guys walking around your high school. But in any event, I think River Ridge is in kind of the same boat as a team like Creekview, a team like Cherokee, and even Etowah, just trying to get the right bodies in place along the offensive line and get that group to work together. And then I think once that falls in line, and again, I sound like a broken record. I understand that. Once that falls into line, I think you'll start seeing a little more success, and that's key. When you can get linemen to open holes for a guy like Cox or Pugh in that 1-2 punch, man, that can be absolutely devastating. It can really wear down a team. And certainly if you establish a run game, that opens up opportunities in the passing game, and um, makes life a little bit easier for a quarterback trying to get his feet under him.
Yeah, and a couple of guys I want to add on there. Gabriel Bellback is a guy that we've seen start last year at
Mm-hmm.
center, and then Dathan Williams. I apologize, however the pronunciation is, but they're all returners this year, and I agree. I think they are obviously replacing a couple of big names. When you go back over that history, you have Jack Hall. He was 6'5", 280. You have Matt Ushak, who played at Marshall. He's 6'7", some ridiculous number. Yeah, John Fletcher. I mean, these are all guys that played college football. They're all on a college football roster, right? Uh, it's hard to replace that year in and year out. And you can't look at 2020 and go back to that offensive line that had those three guys on it
Mm-hmm.
and say, that's the expectation, because you're right. I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but there's a reason we play in classifications so that the schools that have 4,000 kids don't have to compete against the ones that have 1,800 kids, because the amount of 6'5", 300-pound guys you got walking around the halls is pretty limiting when you got 1,800 people in your school. So, I get it from River Ridge's standpoint. I thought that last year they did a fine job navigating with a smaller than usual offensive line, and I think they looked fine this time again. I thought Etowah really put them in pressure situations with the blitzes that they brought. Etowah was very aggressive on defense, which is to be expected, I think, coming from a team that has not had such consistent success for a while. So I'm not shocked by that. I wasn't shocked by seeing that. I think for River Ridge, it's going to be, Sam Vincent, Mateo Jimenez. You mentioned Camden Cox, Micah Pugh. We've talked about Hunter Lockerman. Who else? Who else, right? I mean, that's the thing, is Grant Holly or Thomas Thompson. These are guys that we saw last year that had huge numbers. Who else can pick that up? Or if it's one of those guys, who's going to take their role from last year? Because they had so many different targets. I mean, they ran 5 wide, and your dime corner is playing some guy that would be a starter on every other team in the county. I mean, it was just kind of lopsided for a lot of those games. We saw that a lot in the Sprayberry game. I mean, Sprayberry last year had 2 of the best corners that we've seen in person in arguably ever, as far as the secondary goes, just 2 of the best. And it wasn't the fact that they were dominating, it was the third and fourth receiver options that were getting open because the depth was there. So I think for River Ridge, hopefully they can run the ball more effectively. I think the offensive line can gel a little bit better. Very similar to what we talked about with Cherokee. That's why I think that matchup's probably going to be an interesting one to watch in terms of who runs the ball. But then I think at the end of the day, Hunter Lockerman getting more familiar with his targets and developing in the play action passing game and that intermittent passing game that River Ridge has really been known since Jackson Head was a sophomore, from when they beat Rome and they were just running those 10-yard out routes. And for some reason, Rome didn't know that they were going to do it, even though everyone in the stadium and their mother knew that's what they were going to do. But they've made some great successes off of that. So I like River Ridge. Again, I don't know that there's a coach you can trust more from just year in and year out than Coach Collins in Cherokee County right now. He's proven time and time again he finds a way to make it work, and that staff over there does a great job. And I think this year will be much of the same. I don't see any reason that River Ridge fans shouldn't be excited about what they have on the field. It's just going to be what the matchups individually are. And one last thought on this, going back to the coaching staff. Scrimmages, if you don't know, you don't really prepare for your opponent. You don't have any tape. You're not trying to defend their defense, their offense. You're not game planning. When we've seen River Ridge game plan for teams, which they will be doing from here on out, obviously, they do really well. They're one of the best that if you gave them a week and you said you have to beat this team, what's your plan? They're going to come up with a way to do it. Now, it doesn't always work or it doesn't always get executed properly, but the game plan's there. You can see them adjusting things. I think River Ridge takes a huge advantage in that, Mark, over most of the teams that they will play. So I think for River Ridge, they're in a good spot. I wouldn't be too concerned if you're a Knights fan right now.
Nothing to be concerned about coming out of that scrimmage for the River Ridge Knights, says my good friend and longtime broadcast partner, Will Cooper. We'll see on Friday night. We'll talk about their opponent, their matchup with their opponent, upcoming here on the podcast. But now we'll turn our attention to the Sequoia Chiefs, Coop, who had their scrimmage on August 1st, way back on August 1st, the first day of school for our Cherokee County schools. They hosted the Gilmer Bobcats, came away with a big win against Gilmer. Coop, what are your thoughts initially on Sequoia?
Sequoia. I mean, look. I mean, they beat Gilmer 30-0. I think it was 30-0 at the end of the first half, or it was 24. I mean, look, it's Sequoia. Okay. I mean, they did what Sequoia does. I guess if you want some critique of it, their passing game looked a little disjointed to me at times. I could see some missed assignments on defense from some of the younger guys, but they shut Gilmer out. Now, I know Gilmer is 2A now. Is Gilmer 2A or 3A? There's your trivia question for the day.
I believe they're 2A, Coop, but
I would think so, because Pickens. No, there's.
I believe they're. Let's see.
Because they're in that region with.
They're in
no,
region.
They're with Calhoun. They're 3A.
Yeah, region 7, 3A. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a small school. I think you kind of look at what Gilmer does. They run the wing T, which is why Sequoia scheduled them, and they like playing each other because they're familiar with it. I don't really have much to critique. Again, I thought it was just. I don't want to say Sequoia is to be expected this way, but it almost kind of, from our standpoint, it is playing a 3A team. They handled their business. Yes, the defense had its fits and starts. Again, they're playing a wing T team, and they're got a whole bunch of new starters from last year. It's going to be confusing. Looking at Sequoia's schedule, they're not going to face another wing T team, so you're definitely not preparing for it. I think it was just Sequoia being Sequoia. Will Rajecki looked great. The offensive line looked good. Again, you got Alex Brewer, and Brody Craig. Don't know what else to say there. Colby Martin looked to be in control. Again, the passing game was a little disjointed, I thought, at times. And then the defense was just young and trying to learn how to manage expectations as far as defending a wing T offense. I don't take too much stock in it. They did what they needed to do. That's about all I can add on Sequoia. I hate to be so short about it, but we kind of know what to expect, I think.
Yeah, as expected. And Coop, part of that is because we've seen these young men now, seniors. You talked about guys like Colby Martin, Rajecki, Darling at receiver, Brewer on the offensive line. We've seen these guys year in and year out now for the past 3 years. In some instances, these guys have had that level of varsity experience. So when you come back as a senior, having played 2-3 years previous of experience of varsity level football, I think, like you said, what you see is what you get. You know what you're getting with there. There's not been much turnover in the coaching staff. This is just right now, it seems to be a well-oiled machine. Colby Martin, again, coming off a season with 2,300, almost 2,400 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 64% completion percent. I thought maybe in that scrimmage, there's a couple times they tried to get a little cute. I think that might be their kind of nemesis. Hey, can we not do too much, do what we know works? And I think some of that you get a chance to work out in the scrimmage. We know Will Rajecki's going to give you a hard pounding, charging running back, not afraid to run it between the tackles, run over, in your words, bury men out there as he's running over them. But Bretton Darling, I think, is a sneaky fast wide receiver that I think, at least maybe last year, was underrated by a lot of Sequoia's opponents. I don't think you can look past him in the passing game. And we'll see. They lost some guys like Paul Prisbilic, Noah Gibbons last year, a couple of taller receivers. So we'll see how they replace that. I believe it was Maddox Waller had, at least last year, came up a big in a couple of moments. Then you mentioned the defense. They lost a lot last year. Ian Mariah and Tewo Agundale, two big names off that defense, lost a couple in the secondary. We know that Drew Williams might be a guy that can kind of step in that linebacker spot along with Michael Fountain. But there may be some question marks early on for this Sequoia defense, but I think offensively, Coop, they're just a well-oiled machine right now. And Coach Brent Buddy over there running that defense, we talked about him. I hope we'll be able to talk to him later on this season. Again, another challenging opportunity for him as a coach to get this defense ready to go come week 1 against the Denmark Danes.
Yeah, and a couple of names that I want to mention on the defensive side of the ball that I would put on my hypothetical preseason all county team, which we don't do because we used to do it and we got tired of getting yelled at. But Matthew Matz is one. This is a guy that I think had 7 sacks last year in unison with Ian Mariah on the other side. Carson Gant is another one up front. Cason Gant, I think I have that wrong in my notes. I think it's Cason, Cason Gant. Both of those guys on the defensive line, you mentioned Drew Williams, Tanner Davis is one of those guys, Michael Fountain on the linebacking core. They got a lot of talent offensively. We talk a lot about the offense. I mean, they got 4 kids right now that are going to go play college athletics. 3 of them are going to play college football. And they're going to play Division I football, it looks like. The defense, to me, doesn't need that much talent. It'd be great if they had it, but I don't think they need it. I think a guy like Matthew Matz that we can kind of look at and say, this is arguably one of the best defensive ends in the county right now. That'll be good enough because Sequoia, imagine saying this in 2019 and 2020, they're probably going to score what they averaged last year, 35 points a game, 30 points a game.
30, I believe it was 37 points. It was the most in school history they averaged, Coop.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, what is regression for Sequoia? 31 points per game this year? Okay, well then your defense just like the defense doesn't feel the pressure.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like because the offense has so much returning, you can alleviate it you can help your defense out. And the other thing Sequoia can do, which they've kind of gotten away from, but it's not that they don't want or can't do it. If they just want to run 10 minutes off the clock on you, they can decide to do that. They still got that. I mean, there's nothing more frustrating than being a team that's down by a field goal. You just scored a touchdown, and then you kick it back to Sequoia, and there goes Colby Martin walking off to the sideline to sit there and talk to his coach for 10 seconds, and you're sitting there looking at the clock burning the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, imagine how frustrating that is for I mean, I love it. I love that it's so old school, but it's got to be so frustrating because they're not going to snap the ball with more than 15 seconds on the play clock.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, they can take a lot of pressure off their defense. They don't have to be on the field long. It's just when you get into those games, right? It's that Sprayberry game, it's that Woodstock game, it's that Creekview game. Where do they line up? What if Sequoia can only put up 21 in a game? Do you trust your defense to do that? I don't think they have to trust them to do it week 1. Week 2, maybe playing Kel week 2. So, week 3, week 4, maybe. But I think that overall, as you kind of get through the season, I think that that's a defensive unit that, again, you can trust Brent Buddy to put it together. I think he's proven that he's one of the best defensive coordinators we've seen in the county and currently on the staff. I think that they've got it figured out. I don't have a lot of critiques for Sequoia. The score of 30-0 didn't surprise me. There was nothing that gave me pause. There was nothing that I thought, man, this looks different than what I thought it was going to. It was just, Sequoia joyless murder ball. It was the typical Sequoia, here we come and here we go. That's it. And we're going to be home by 9:30. That's what they do. So get Sequoia, man.
Well, look, Coop, you said you weren't going to talk about them a whole lot, and we managed to spend at least 5 minutes talking about the Sequoia Chiefs. But there's our review of Sequoia as noted, as expected. We'll move on to the Woodstock Wolverines, our last team. We'll review. Coop, they faced, I believe, Centennial in their scrimmage and came away with a victory. Not too surprised by that. Returning a passer that threw for over 2,000 yards, 15 touchdowns. He also is a team's leading returning rusher. He ran for 485 yards. Big question mark, I think, is can Woodstock continue to run the football? We heard that Trace Washington might be in the backfield. That is an absolute load and would be scary even if you have him as a lead blocker up front. But I think for me, I'm most interested to see this Woodstock defense. I know they're missing their 2 linebackers from a year ago in Burmeister and his name's going to escape.
Cooper Price.
Thank you, Cooper Price. Coop coming in with the save there. But I do think that the secondary is going to be solid. I think, you flip Trace Washington. He's playing a little bit of linebacker. He's growing up. He'll be a junior this season. I think it could be a very, very good looking Woodstock football team, despite losing all their wide receivers and their two best linebackers.
Look, you hit it on the head. We just got done talking about Sequoia, who's got all this college talent. If you haven't noticed, Woodstock is quickly turning that into that as well. I mean, Graham Burmeister is starting to get some FBS attention, an offer from Miami of Ohio. And then Trace Washington, I believe, picked up an offer from Rutgers this past week. So it's not that they don't have college talent. I mean, they're turning it out quickly, which who would have thought 3 years ago we'd be sitting here talking about Woodstock starting quarterback and their linebacker, who does have to fill the role of two of the more impressive linebackers that we've seen in the county, really probably in the last decade. But when you kind of turn the coin over, setting up this year, I think they got so many exciting pieces to look at. Jordan Foster, we talked to Coach Devine about him. He was playing basketball. He decided to come out this year, 6'4", 210 pounds. He's playing tight end. Who's going to cover him? I mean, he's playing basketball. He can high point a ball. He's athletic. Good luck. You mentioned, they're going to have to find some running game because Isaiah Payton's gone. He ran for 1,000 yards last year. Okay, well, you're going to hand the ball off to Trace Washington. Good luck with that, right? I mean, who's going to tackle him? I mean, it just, for me, Woodstock did not lose a ton on the offensive line. They're returning guys like Jameer Richardson. They have some depth returning up front. To me, they look a little bit more complete up there. I like what I see from Woodstock on the front line. Their receiving core, they're losing a lot from last year as well. I think they're returning a good group of guys that are looking good. Again, Jordan Foster adding to that group. I think there's a lot of talent there. Defensively, I think their secondary is one of the best. Daniel Palmise, we've seen. Tyler Barbera is a guy that we've had our eye on since his freshman year. One of the most athletic guys in Cherokee County and in the region. I think that they have plenty of opportunities to be as good as they were last year, if not better. I like the question that you asked Coach Devine, and it's been on my mind about Woodstock, is are you still going to have the same mentality of being the hunter instead of being hunted? Because you can no longer surprise people. When they rolled into Creekview last year, they surprised everybody by winning that game, right?
Mm-hmm.
They surprised everybody by losing to River Ridge by a margin. They surprised everybody by, losing to Sequoia by a close margin. This year, you're not going to do that. Sequoia knows what you are. Creekview knows what you are. River Ridge knows what you are. Sprayberry knows what you are. You're dangerous. You're dangerous now. So for me, what does that team, what identity do they take into this year? I know they're going to be physical because they always have been under Coach Devine. But when you get into that mental game, right, especially that first game against Etowah, opening with the Battle of Town Lake, man, it's so easy to be riding your high horse into that game. There's so much disdain, but it's easy to say, yeah, but they're Etowah, right? We went to the playoffs. They haven't been to the playoffs since 2019. What do we got to worry about? I know Coach Devine is telling them something different. And sometimes when you're dealing with high school kids, as you know, being a dad, sometimes what you say doesn't always get listened to. But I think for everything, I think that Woodstock has the ability to compete for the region title. I think they're as set up as anybody else. As far as notes on the scrimmage, I don't have a ton. It looked like Woodstock. They ran the ball really well. They ran the ball surprisingly well, I think, better than they looked last year at times. And I think Graham Burmeister has grown a ton. I mean, just watching his command of the offense and the team, he looks like a guy that's been starting for a season. He looks like it's his team, which it is. So I like Woodstock. I don't have a lot to critique from what I saw. I don't have a lot that you should be worried about necessarily, which is exactly why you should be worried, because people like us are giving what Nick Saban would call rat poison to them by telling them how good they are. But, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter till you get on the field.
You're right about that, Coop. It does not matter. I don't have any additional commentary for Woodstock. I'm ready to jump into these week one previews. And up first, We'll talk about it. The game is River Ridge Cherokee. We'll kind of go in alphabetical order, and Cherokee happens to be the first team we come to. So we'll talk about River Ridge and Cherokee together in this ball game. Coop, this game's going to take place over at the at River Ridge. They call it the Castle. I know one time they called it Ridge County. I mean, it's I don't know. Have we established a nickname for River Ridge's home stadium?
We called it the Ridge for a while. I mean, the castle seems the most fitting because they're the knights and they would defend the castle. I don't know if there are any River Ridge, fans, players, students. What do y'all call it? Because they don't have. I don't think they have like a banner that says, like this is what it's called. But I mean, we can take a vote, I guess.
Fan vote. We can
Yeah.
sub the official unofficial stadium nickname for every Cherokee County high school. We can certainly put that to the test. But in any event, Coop, River Ridge will host Cherokee at the Ridge. I think that we'll stay with that right there. And Coop, again, we talked about both teams separately here in the preview. I'm telling you, my biggest question mark is which team can run the ball better. And that I think that will. I know I'm going to bury the lead here, but I think that's the answer to the the winner of this ball game.
Uh, Basically, yeah. I mean, it's to me a segment of the running game is the offensive line. From watching the scrimmages, I thought that both Cherokee and River Ridge, the biggest question marks they had was offensive line at times. It was Cherokee more than River Ridge, but Cherokee's defensive line looks really good to me. So yeah, I mean, I think that's your matchup, right? Is Cherokee's defensive line versus River Ridge's offensive line, and River Ridge's defensive line that gave Etowah and that group just tons of pressure throughout the entire scrimmage compared to what Cherokee can block. I think it comes down to I think it's going to be one of the best running back games. I think if we get to the end of the game and you have Brandon Hamilton's got over 100 yards, or Micah Pugh, or Camden Cox, or whoever River Ridge puts in the backfield over 100 yards, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. I think to me it comes down to the quarterback play. I think this is something that you have two quarterbacks who are starting for the first time. You have Hunter Lockerman, who's had a little bit more varsity experience, I believe, but not a ton. And the receiving cores are pretty new on both sides. There's not a lot of returners on both of those. So I guess for me, the question is if it does end up being a 14-14 game in the fourth quarter, you got the ball with 3 minutes left and you're out of timeouts. Who can do a 2-minute offense effectively? Who can work the sidelines effectively? I don't have the answer to that. But I would see that's how the game goes. I don't see either team. Last year, Dave and I called this game at Tommy Baker Field. It was 21-7 when the rain finally came in. As Coach Collins said, it kind of did them a favor because it was Cherokee all the way. They were just running over River Ridge. I don't see that happening this year. I think, first of all, River Ridge is going to know what to expect a little bit more. And secondly, I think Cherokee's a much different team that's not going to put up points in bunches like that. So I see the game within a field goal, touchdown margin. It just depends on me who's going to take care of the ball. And one thing that River Ridge had some real problems with was turning the ball over in the scrimmage. Can River Ridge limit the turnovers? I think and this is going to be so cliche, but whoever doesn't turn the ball over, whoever runs the ball well, as you mentioned, but I think quarterback play and who's not going to turn the ball over is really the key in this game. And I think that whoever wins the game has a really big feather in their cap for their new starter.
I completely agree, Coop, with that. A big confidence booster for the winner, especially the winning quarterback here. You touched on turnovers. I know you mentioned it's kind of cliche to talk about that. I, I think it's true, though. That's a lot of truth in that, who can take care of the football, who can run the football, especially with two teams that don't have an experienced passer. Certainly, and you talked about the game within the game, the River Ridge defense versus defensive line versus Cherokee's defensive line, and vice versa. Cherokee's defensive line versus River Ridge's offensive line. That game within the game should go a long way in determining the victor. Coop, I know home field advantage is not as big of a deal in high school as it is in certainly college. But I think home field advantage does play a little bit here on Friday night. I think for the Ridge, I think it plays into their favor, and I like the Ridge to squeak by Cherokee. And maybe not the most high scoring game, but certainly in a game that will feature some big plays.
I just realized this year I could do predictions because I'm not the play-by-play guy anymore. I'm removed from my
Your
required
duties.
neutralism. Yeah, I haven't even considered that. Well, if you're new here, the Cooper predictor is a mathematical predictor that kicks in week 3. That's usually what I use. It's usually right about 80 to 85% of the time. Since we don't have it until we get some real games in. Um, Heart of Hearts, I agree. You had Rivers by what, 4? You said?
Well, I didn't announce it, but I said
Oh,
I don't think I did, but
sorry.
I do like River Ridge to squeak by. But 4, sure, 4 points
Squeak
sounds
by.
good. Sure, 17,
I mean,
21, 17, 24, 20. Sure.
I'll go 3. I'll go 24-21. But yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I agree. Home field advantage, maybe not the biggest thing in the world, but there's a comfort level to it. River Ridge did host Etowah there last week. So there's a level of comfort with getting to play there back to back weeks. Cherokee, on the other hand, is not having that ability. And I wouldn't be surprised one way, again, if Cherokee wins by a field goal or a touchdown wouldn't surprise me. The only surprise would come if we get to the end of that game and somebody won by, 2 possessions or more.
Mm-hmm. Agreed, my friend. Where shall we go next, Coop? I believe if we're going in alphabetical order, Creekview is next up. And we'll save our game of the week for our last game. But Creekview traveling to the Class 3A state champion, Calhoun Yellow Jackets. Coop, what are your thoughts on this one?
Boy, uh, out of the frying pan into the fryer for Creekview. Look, I mean, it's a 3A team, yes. Would Calhoun beat most 3A, 4A, 5A, and 6A teams? Also, yes, they would. Calhoun has a pedigree of being really good. They're a city school. Draw your own conclusions. They do a really good job over there. They've been a consistent program. This is a game that Creekview won last year. And much to the chagrin of Calhoun, who did everything they could to play the whole game because they felt like they could come back and win it, it just never worked out for them. Um, I think for Creekview, key to this game is that they have to find ways to be explosive on offense. I feel like we've been saying this for the last 2 years. Please find a way to be explosive on offense because they have been at times really hard to watch. And Creekview for the last couple of years, when they get down by 14 or 21, it's like you can turn the game off or you can leave. And we don't want it to be that way. And I don't think Creekview wants it to be that way either, especially with a Calhoun team that's returning so much. I mean, they have a big advantage in what they've got coming back. Quarterback coming back for Calhoun. I think for Creekview, the key is to take it to a boxing reference. Shocking, I know, but to take it to a boxing reference, it would be you have to feel out the first couple of rounds. You have to get used to how the hits land. You have to get used to the reach. You have to get used to the footwork and the range. I think that's the same thing with Creekview. Calhoun's going to score. They're going to keep you from scoring time to time. So at the end of the first, is it 7-0? Is it 7-7? Is it not? What is that? Because if they can get through that first quarter, I think that they can settle in. I think that some of those younger guys can kind of start to lean in a little bit. That offensive line can get to work a little bit more. I think biggest question for me is that defensive front against Calhoun is you got to get pressure on Calhoun. You have to. So for Creekview, they're going to need to find some pressure. Obviously, we've talked about their linebacking core replacing a lot. We've heard Mason Munn's going to be playing some linebacker this year. I think that's great. He's a very athletic guy. They're going to need that. I like their secondary in this matchup. I think that it bodes well for Creekview, but the running game for Calhoun does concern me. I've got Calhoun by about 10 in this one.
All right, Coop. I'm going to work backwards here. I like your number. I'm almost in agreement. We're almost in lockstep there.
Uh-oh.
I think for Creekview, you mentioned it, kind of making it the explosive plays. I think Creekview wants to control the time of possession, not just in this game, but in every game. And they do it in a different way than Sequoia, but almost like Sequoia likes to control the time of possession. I feel like they're going to beat you on the ground first. And I think that's been Creekview. We talked about Penrod's ability to scramble, similar to his predecessor, Austin Guest. We talked about his ability to push the ball down the field every now and then. But I think right now the question is, does Creekview have enough talent at receiver to to really challenge secondaries. And I think that is all set up by the passing game, or by the run, excuse me, by the run game. And can they get Mason Munn off to a fast start? Will Travis Vines be able to make plays? Will Carson Lott be able to make plays and really take some pressure off of Alex Penrod as he gets his first varsity start? Certainly won't be his first varsity passing attempts, but first varsity start. And again, I think the secondary, it's a little bit strength on strength here. Calhoun with a quarterback who threw for over 2,000 yards as a freshman, 23 touchdowns, just one interception. So he doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes. Might be the best quarterback prospect, Georgia grown quarterback prospect that we've seen since Julian Lewis, who just left high school a year early to go to Colorado, which is wild to even think about. He should be playing his senior year at Carrollton right now. But nonetheless, I think Hawkins, we talked about him at quarterback. We saw him a little bit last season come in that game and spell Crossland, who's now transferred over to Alabama. But Hawkins rushed for 352 yards, have 5 touchdowns, and then another freshman joining him in the backfield, and also versatility at receiver is Isaiah Knowles. He was a preseason all-region guy, 781 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns, caught 17 passes, and another receiving TD. So up front, that's impressive. And as good as Calhoun is on offense, Coop, I think where they will be much better this year is defense. They've got 2 bona fide defensive linemen, and a guy like Sager Quinn, who just signed with South Florida, and then Alec Upshaw, 6'3", 235 defensive end. These 2 guys will really put pressure on that interior Creekview offensive line, and that's going to be a game within the game. You want to talk about having your work cut out. Coach Williams is going to have to find a way to control a line and neutralize these 2 to control a line of scrimmage. And even then, if you're able to X out those 2 players, Quinn, Upshaw, Jackson Williams, another defensive lineman, you've still got Blake Hammett, one of the top linebackers in Class 3A, running behind them, coming up to stuff the run and fit the run there. So I think it's going to be a tall task with a team that doesn't have as much experience as we maybe have historically seen from Creekview. So I think the experience edge goes to Calhoun, even though their quarterback is just a sophomore. He's a sophomore that helped lead his team to the state title game. So all that, as you say, with all that being said, I do like Calhoun by 11. I think it's going to be a raucous environment up there at Phil Reeve Stadium. This is their, I believe, 5th or 6th state championship overall in school history. First one certainly for Coach Henderson. I said Coach Henderson. I don't think it's Coach. It's just Coach Stevenson. Excuse me. I'm thinking of another football program. In any event, I think it's going to be a raucous atmosphere. First game of the season. You open up at home. Again, a stadium where you're all up. You're right on the action. It's a historical Northwest Georgia power. I think maybe second only to Dalton in terms of wins in school and program history. So a lot of things seem to be working against Creekview in this one, and they would have to have a flawless ball game, I think, to pull the upset up in Calhoun.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, not a lot I can add to that. I guess the only thing I would say in terms of good news for Creekview is that I think that they do have on paper, they have the talent to match Calhoun right now. So it's a winnable game for sure. Again, I don't love that they have to go to Calhoun to play it. I don't love the fact that it's the first start for Penrod as a quarterback. That doesn't always make me feel awesome when you have to go to Calhoun to do it, but you're going to at least get that under your belt and out of the way on Friday. So, I think it's a winnable game for Creekview. I just think that Calhoun is probably a little bit over a possession better at least where we sit right now. So, but again, I wouldn't be shocked if Creekview wins that game or if Creekview keeps it within a field goal or a touchdown or again at 10. I think the surprise would be if you start getting up towards the 14, 17, 21 mark, then I would be surprised. And maybe Calhoun's a little better than we thought.
Certainly. Good points right there, Coop. Good enough for us to move on to our third game that we'll take a look at, and that will be the Sequoia Chiefs. They will host the Denmark Danes on Friday night, Coop. This game last year played out to a 38-35 victory for Sequoia as they won on the road over there at Denmark in the Dog Pound. Coop, we talked about Sequoia's offense. I want to give you a chance to give you your thoughts on the game first, and I'll tell you what I know about Denmark, and then we can kind of go from there and prognosticate.
I think its score probably might be a little similar this year. Again, this is a very young defense that is trying to find their footing. They did well against Gilmer, but you're going to play a team in the top classification in 6A right now. I think that Denmark's going to score 38-35, maybe not that much. But I still think Sequoia is the favorite. I still think Sequoia looks like they're going to win. I give you my prediction after you do, since I went first last time. But I do think that this is an opportunity for Sequoia to maybe solidify themselves offensively. Not that they need to necessarily, but I think the bigger question is defense. I think you're going to play a Denmark team that has shown, especially over the last couple of years, that they have plenty of talent that can score. So that would be my biggest question is, what does Sequoia hold Denmark to? Is it 35 again? Hopefully not. Is it 28, 21? Okay, now we're talking. So I like where Sequoia is at heading into this game. Again, I don't know that anyone's not going to have them favored. Sequoia's made a couple of appearances in those top 10s, including yours in 5A. I don't know where you're getting the disrespect for them from, but I get it, I guess. So, gotta pay the bills. But at the end of the day, man, I like where Sequoia lines up for this one.
Yeah, Coop. Sequoia is a team I could not leave out of my top 10 this season. And I think maybe have them ranked a little low, but I think our county teams rarely get the benefit of the doubt from the Turf Ferguson report. But in any event, they'll face a Denmark team, Coop, that has not missed the postseason, save for their very first inaugural year. They've been in the postseason, haven't always had the prettiest record, but they've always been in the postseason. It's been 7 consecutive seasons in that highest classification. Look, they've got a running back. They returned their top running back, Noah Laban, had 988 yards, 10 touchdowns last season. And also their second leading receiver, Cam Jennings. He was committed to play for James Madison as a defensive back. He brings back 15 receptions, 389 yards, 4 touchdowns. Offensively, though, they'll be breaking in a new quarterback. Their signal caller from last year, Matthew Bear, I believe, transferred up to the New England State somewhere. So they are going to be breaking in a new quarterback this season as well. So I think this comes down to, as we talked about before in a couple of previous previews, strength on strength. And the strength for Denmark right now really is their defense. They've got a couple of young men, standout players, Dalton Talent at linebacker, Evan James at defensive line, guys that are really playmakers. We talked about Cam Jennings, defensive back, and then Kalen Williams, also another defensive back. This defense will certainly be the strength of this Denmark team early going. So can Sequoia attack and score against this Denmark defense? And then, as you mentioned, hey, on the other end of the football here, what is Sequoia going to do? I think we do have to look at that. I don't think Sequoia wants to win. They'll win it however they can take it. I'd imagine, but I would think that Sequoia would love to win this game, kind of going away, 2, 3, 4 scores. I don't think they're going to blow out Denmark by any stretch of the imagination by 4 scores. Of course, I'll be eating crow on Saturday morning. I'm sure Coach Buddy will let me know about it if that happens to be the case. In any event, those are my thoughts on this game. I do like Sequoia. I think it's going to be a much closer game than some pundits may call, but I like the Chiefs by 6. I think it's going to be too much Will Rajecki and too much Colby Martin, and too much experience on that side. They'll put up more points. than Denmark, and I think they can outscore Denmark this season again.
I agree. I think it'll be higher scoring. I don't know if it'll get to 70 plus points like last year. I like Sequoia by 10. One thing we did not talk about in the preseason show is that Sequoia is adding Leif Hansen, who's a kicker for them. I believe that's the correct pronunciation. It's Leif, and I'm doing this from memory. So
That would
please
be
pardon me
Leaf.
if I get anything wrong. But I saw from some of the results from some kicking camps and seeing his tape, this is a guy that's hitting 50 plus yard field goals pretty consistently. I think that gives them another weapon on offense. Not that they needed it, but hey, why not? So I like Sequoia by about 10. I agree. I would be shocked if they win by 3, 4 possessions, but I do think that they win by a couple. So I'll go to 10 on that.
All right. Well, there we have it, Coop. Look, we've got our appetizers out of the way. It's time for our main course, our game of the week, the North Georgia Sports Report game of the week. Will be featured. We'll feature the Battle of Town Lake, one of the biggest rivalries in the county. Etowah will host Woodstock. Coop, this rivalry almost as close as you can get. This will be the 26th installment. Etowah has a 1-game lead in the series. They lead 13-12. Last year was Woodstock getting the victory 24-7 in the season opener. We talked about it before. Woodstock making the playoffs last season, going 7-4. Etowah missing the playoffs, going 2-8. New Coach Vavra, old Coach Divine, I guess we can say that now.
Yeah, third years. So
30
yeah.
years, right? He's a fixture. Coop, what do you see in this matchup?
Man, to me, it's going to be probably one of the most physical iterations of the Battle of Town Lake that we've seen. You've got two coaches that have been preaching physicality since they came into the county, and we already know that the schools don't like each other. We always talk about how we rate rivalries, and it's if you share a Walmart, you're a rival. If you share a Waffle House, you're a big rival. These kids share everything. They've been playing ball with each other since they were, since Hector was a pup. So I get it. As far as just intangibles go, I think the biggest question for me is the fact that Woodstock's defense is undergoing some changes, especially along that linebacking core. What will their pass rush be like? Can they make Zeke Douglas uncomfortable? Because this is a guy that does have experience, and he's started the Battle of Town Lake before, so he's not going to be shocked by that. This is one of the only times in the county we'll get to say this. Both him and Graham Burmeister both started this game before, so they understand what it means. They understand it. So you're not going to surprise anybody by that. So I think for me, the biggest question is physicality. If Etowah comes out and punches Woodstock in the mouth, do they find their footing pretty quickly? Are they able to come back and throw a good punch? I think when you look at just the terms of the roster and what we know, you have to give the advantage to Woodstock, right? I mean, just in terms of what we know and what we're used to with seeing them, especially from last season. But overall, I don't know that this is a game that they can run away with. I really don't. I just think that there's so much pride in this game that Etowah is going to come out, and they've been planning for this game the entire summer. It's the one that they talk about. It's the game that they just want to win more than any other game, I would say. So all that being said, you tend to throw those things out the window in terms of records from last season. You throw out what you know. I see a very hungry Etowah team that is dangerous, and I see a Woodstock team that's on the rise. Just to give you my prediction, I like Woodstock by a couple of touchdowns in this one. I got them at about 14 on this. I think that Etowah, if you just want some crazy prediction, I think Etowah is going to get out to a fast start. I think that they're going to play with nothing to lose, and it's going to take Woodstock a minute to adjust to that. But I do like the Wolverines coming out on top just because of the depth and the size difference that we're seeing right now from across the board.
Yeah, size difference. Also, Coop, I think experience plays a huge factor in a game like this, in a rivalry game. We have seen in this rivalry game where this has been much closer than anticipated, where maybe it was Woodstock who was maybe on the shorter end of the talent level, and Etowah certainly are giving Etowah all they wanted and more, and then vice versa. We've seen where Etowah was kind of on the we thought, oh, this is a team that does not stand a chance here in this game, and they come out and make a couple plays here, a couple big runs, and you get your opposition on their heels. And so I don't, I think just looking at the raw numbers, we see the experience with Burmeister coming back. We know what Palmisi and Barbera look like on the defensive end. We know Tyler Howard, how impressive he's looked as a linebacker. We talked about Trace Washington already. I think my big question for Woodstock is, all right, how well will they be able to throw the football? But I think again, and it's not from a perspective of their quarterback. I think how well will their receivers be ready to step into the limelight? And again, this is a team that lost all 3, 4, however many of their top wide receivers from a year ago and their top running back. I think they will be able to move the football. I think my question is, how many times can Etowah score? I don't think Etowah won't score, but will they be able to score? I think that they're going to need 3 or 4 touchdowns to be in contention to win this ball game. Coop, I don't think they can win this one 10-7. I think they're going to be Woodstock's going to be able to score a few more points, and again, they'll certainly their second Woodstock secondary will make it difficult for for Zeke Douglas throwing the ball downfield. So I think it's imperative for Etowah to run the ball or to find a way to run the ball, whether that's through Douglas scrambling, Walker Hughes, or whoever they put back there in the backfield. We know they have some playmakers at Etowah. Do they have enough on Friday night? I don't think they'll have enough. I think they'll make this game a lot closer than people think. I like Woodstock by 6. I'll say on the road, but really across the street. As this rivalry, you talked about how much these two schools share in common, but I think this ought to be, the 26th edition of the Battle of Town Lake should be just as good as any.
Agreed, 100%. I wouldn't expect anything less. I think the reason my number's a little higher than yours is just because of I see that fourth quarter and those bigger bodies weighing down on Etowah maybe a little bit more. But I agree. The question of how much can you score, because I agree, Woodstock's not going to be held to 10 or 14. So can you score 21? Can you score 28? And what is that magic number, I guess, is the biggest question, because defensively is probably the biggest unknown for Etowah right now. So I like your prognostication, so to speak. But there you go, partner. We've gotten through all of our previews. I think it's time for everyone to get upset with us, because it is time for those darn power rankings.
It is time, Coop. It is time for our power rankings, and we'll play ping pong. We'll go back and forth here. And as normal, we'll start at the bottom. I'll go first, since I'm the visitor, I guess. I'll play the visitor this week. But a lot of my predictions or my power rankings come from what we saw last season and our anticipation of this season. I'm starting with the Etowah Eagles at number 6 in my power ranking this week.
Yeah, same. I got Etowah at 6. It's just unknown is unknown. Scrimmages matter a little bit to me in rating them, but not a ton, not enough to jump anybody else. So till I see something else, I got Etowah at 6.
All right. You're up.
Number 5, I'm going to put Cherokee at number 5. I think it's too much transition to put them any higher right now until we see Sawyer Ray and we see, some of this, the new offensive line gel a little bit more. I can't put them any higher. I think the defense is going to give them a big boost. The defense is really why I put them over Etowah, to be honest. Obviously if they beat River Ridge this week, we'll have a lot more to talk about, but that's where I've got them at 5.
All right. I've got, it's like we're a mirror image so far. We're 2 for 2. I've got Cherokee as well. Just a lot of lost production coming, from the 2024 team, the 2025 team. I think there's a lot of potential, a lot of opportunity, but right now I've got them until we really get an idea of the quarterback play, the receiver play. Can they run the ball effectively and efficiently? I think Cherokee sits right above Etowah at number 5 this week for me. And now I get, my turn again. So at number 4, I'm going to go with Creekview for a lot of the reasons we mentioned the 2 previous teams. I think there's just a lot of question marks from the quarterback play. I think a question mark is maybe not necessarily the quarterback play, but just the experience at the position. And it's for Creekview losing top 2, 3 receivers. You do have your top running back. He'll be playing both ways. So I'm curious, cautiously optimistic. I think there's plenty of to build around. I said this Creekview team could very well be sneaky good, and wouldn't be surprised by that. I think right now they're the number 4 team in the county, Coop.
Yeah, I got River Ridge at number 4. Main reason for that, again, scrimmages don't mean a ton to me, but they do mean something. Just so many turnovers against Etowah. It's concerning for right now. Now, again, if they come out against Cherokee and they don't turn the ball over at all, I'll be happy to move them up. I think them and Creekview are in a very similar spot. Everything you just said about Creekview can just about be said for River Ridge as well. I think the one thing that River Ridge maybe we don't have to rely on is that Creekview runs the ball a little bit better than River Ridge does, historically speaking. And I think that might be the case this year. So I trust the Creekview ground game more. So I put River Ridge at 4, knowing that if they do improve in the running game, Hunter Lockerman looks like I kind of expect him to look towards the end of the season. And also that they're able to run the ball more effectively, then I'll be happy to move them. But I got them at 4 to start the year.
All right.
So that takes me to number 3,
Mhm.
where I do have Creekview that you just mentioned. Again, I kind of just pointed out why they're a little bit higher. I think that Mason Munn returns. They have a stable of running backs. The offensive line looks pretty good. Obviously the quarterback play is a question, just like it is for every team that's below this, except for Etowah. I think you're really just trying to find what works. Now, do I penalize them a ton for only scoring 14 against Cherokee? No. And should I penalize them a ton if they lose to Calhoun? No. It depends by how much, and it depends what they look like in doing it. Or if they come out with a win, then obviously we got to reevaluate the whole power ranking. But essentially, to this point, I just feel like Creekview with the secondary, with the offensive line, the running back core, I feel like they just have a couple more pieces that I trust than River Ridge. But hopefully, River Ridge can prove me wrong on Friday, and I'll just be not, and we'll just be bulletin board material.
As usual, we'll be bulletin board materials. Coop, I think this is the only place we deviate here, and I've got River Ridge at number 3. I do like the 2-headed monster. That's to me has been a proven commodity in Cam Cox and Micah Pugh. I think those two guys have established themselves. Hunter Lockerman, you mentioned, I don't want to say the jury's still out. How good can he be? We still don't know, and so I think that's a question mark for me. I think the River Ridge defense, at least the front 7, I feel like it might be a little stronger than what we've seen from Creekview. And they run their defenses a little bit differently, so it's not comparing apples to apples here. But I think River Ridge, where they finished the season last year, the momentum they had, even though they lost in the first round, I think just how they were able to go into the Grizzly Den and beat them. I know different set of players this season, but I think that that's where I tip my cap to River Ridge. And again, I like the fact that they've got 2 bona fide running backs, where I think Creekview has a bona fide one and 2 backs that have the potential to be very good and look very similar to this River Ridge backfield. But question marks along the offensive line for River Ridge as well for me. Question marks at quarterback and receiver, but I think there's a little bit more returning in that backfield, and that's why I like them. And now I get the number 2 pick. And had you told me last year that I would be picking this team, number 2, I think I would have told you you're crazy. I would never say anything like that, but I am. I do have the Woodstock Wolverines at number 2, Coop, returning maybe the second most experienced, decorated quarterback in the county this season. I think it starts there. This is a team with a lot of momentum. I think they shocked a lot of people around the county, including myself. It was a pleasant surprise last season. I think they are on the up and up. The question, you mentioned it before when we talked about Woodstock segment, can they make the transition from being the hunter to the hunted now, because they're not going to sneak up on anybody? But I think Coach Devon has enough experience to make sure his troops either don't look past anyone or keep them with that hungry mentality. I think that's that ultimately they've got to maintain that hunger, that drive of, hey, this is not enough. We're not satisfied. And I think Woodstock will have an opportunity. I don't know if they can or not, and time will tell. But I certainly think they will have an opportunity to earn themselves a home playoff spot this season. And I think that's the high water mark, I think, but I don't doubt they will be in a position to play for or compete for a home playoff spot.
Yeah, I think that when you look at our power ranking, for me, there's or 6 through 3, and they're kind of bunched up a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. And,
Mm-hmm.
and what I mean by that is that if Etowah played River Ridge, or if Etowah played Creekview in a regular season game and they beat them, it wouldn't shock me terribly. And then I think 2 and 1 are ahead above the rest, and that's where I have Woodstock at number 2 as well. Uh, I think you hit it right on the head, partner. I mean, it's just one of those things that they have pieces that they've lost, yes, but the pieces that they're returning are young and reliable, and they're running a really good program over there. Things seem to be firing on all cylinders. I don't have any reason that I can put them below it. Both their scrimmages, they handled their opponents. They played Cherokee in the spring. They played Centennial here just a couple of weeks ago. I don't have anything that I can look at and point to and say, this is a big glaring concern. Again, receiving core is probably the big question, and then the linebacking core is the other question. But around them is plenty of talent. I think Woodstock's going to be right there in that race for that region title 2 seed, like you mentioned, to play a game at the Woodshed for the playoffs this year. I don't see that as a surprising prediction, I guess I would say. It's not something that would shock me. So that's why I have Woodstock at 2, agree with everything you said. And that, of course, makes number 1 pretty obvious for you and I, and everybody can hold their breath. And this is what I'll say. Until they lose a game against another Cherokee County team, I don't know how you can expect us to put them anywhere else, because it's Sequoia at number 1. I mean, we've kind of said ad nauseum here in the last couple episodes everything they're returning. It's not that they're perfect or flawless. We have questions, especially on defense in particular. But with that being said, I don't know how you would pick them when they haven't lost an in-county game in, 4 years at this point?
Yeah, Coop. I think Rip Van Winkle fell asleep the last time Sequoia lost an in-county game. We It almost seems like this is the Sequoia Chiefs podcast network. As much as we've been talking about them here, and as much as we've been lauding them and singing their praises, much to the chagrin of some other county programs. But look, they have answered the bell week in and week out over the last 4 years. They returned the most experienced team. We've talked about it, like you said, ad nauseum. There's Until somebody knocks the king off the mountain. I mean, Sequoia will be at top of our poll, and I would not be shocked if they were at the top come the end of this this podcast this season. And that's not to say they're going to go undefeated. I think they've got some difficult matchups. I know Denmark will be certainly up to the task. I know that Kell will certainly be looking for revenge as they come to Skip Pope later this season before we get into region play. And we talked about Woodstock, and then there's also a team like Sprayberry who new coaching staff over there, but same players that have given our Cherokee County teams fit. So again, this is not to say that Sequoia is going to, run the table and go undefeated this year. I think that would certainly be, high up there on the maybe the priority list for them, but one game at a time. But right now, in terms of Cherokee County, top 10, top team in our county, and certainly, in my opinion, one of the top 10 teams in the state in the Class 5A classification. My only question is, can Coach Brent Buddy do it again? I mean, if this guy is, the problem is if his defense, and I'm picking on Coach Buddy, if his defense gives up 25, 28 points a game, then maybe not. Maybe we will see somebody knock Sequoia off. But I have, a full faith in Coach Buddy that he's gonna get these guys right. And regardless of what happens on Friday night against Denmark, I think once we get into region play, this Sequoia defense will be humming, Coop.
Yeah, there's no reason not to trust them after what we've seen for the last 3 years. There's nothing that's shown that we shouldn't put faith in them to figure it out. So until proven otherwise, they will have my first place vote, with the knowledge that if they did lose to a Cherokee County team, we would certainly have to reorganize things. But
Is it in Teeter we trust, or is it in Buddy we trust? Or I mean, are we putting them on the spot here, Coop?
I would say the whole coaching staff.
Yeah.
I mean, Coach Jack Mine over there has
Yeah.
put together a great plan offensively, putting up over 35 points per game last year. Coach Buddy has done a great job really over the last couple of years of developing that defense. And then obviously Coach Teeter is the one that makes the in-game decisions, keeps it all humming together. And we've seen them make some really great decisions, in particular over the last couple of years with some close games. So I guess I'm going to say Teeter, just because he's the head man there, and to the king goes the spoils. But I mean, you have to give credit to the whole staff over there, and really to the players as well. I think that I trust Coach Teeter to handle the in game. I trust Coach Jack Mine. I trust Coach Buddy to handle the week in, week out responsibilities of getting their team ready to play as well. So no weak spots in the offensive, defensive, coaching staff at all.
And just one game nugget there. I failed to mention this during the segment, but that Denmark game, if Coach Teeter and the Sequoia Chiefs can get a win, it will tie him for the all-time leading coaching wins at Sequoia. He'll be tied with Coach Maxwell, longtime coach Sid Maxwell over there at Sequoia. So certainly something to look at. And Coop, before I forget, I know we're getting ready to sign off here. But before we do, I just want to let the folks know, hey, if you did want to listen to, if you're a Creekview fan, if you're a Calhoun fan, if you happen to be listening, if you did want, or a Cherokee County football fan, want to listen to that ball game, you can hear it live on 101.1 The Pulse. I will be joining my good friend and longtime broadcaster Dave Garner in the booth. We will be, along with Jackson Wright, it'll be a three-man crew. We are excited to be bringing that game from Phil Reeve Stadium. Tune in 101.1 The Pulse, or you can find it on 101thepulse.com. I believe I'm saying all of that right. New call signal, certainly for that broadcast, but same station, new call name. But looking forward to that, Coop, and looking forward to being, seeing if my big head can fit in the broadcast booth with Dave Garner's big head. And we'll see how we make that work.
Yes. Well, I'm super excited for you guys. I will be listening, and I will also be keeping a close eye on our game of the week in Woodstock and Etowah. We'll be doing some updates from that game as well. We'll be making sure that everybody gets updated, and we'll be awarding a player of the game, as we used to do. We'll be back to that. We'll do players of the games and all of that good stuff. So we appreciate everybody for being with us. Excited to listen to you and Dave on the call on 101.1. Again, invite everybody to check that out. We'll be doing our updates on social media. So put in your headphones, listen to them. Keep an eye on our socials while we're updating things. Should be a lot of fun. Folks, it's kickoff time.
It's here.
We did it. We went, here we are 9 months later. We did it again. But we really do appreciate everybody for taking their time to be with us today. And Art, good luck on Friday, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
Excited to hear you. Excited to see what Creekview can do in Calhoun. And again, excited for all of our teams this week. So thank you all so much for being with us on the North Georgia Sports Report here on the North Georgia Sports Network. Thank you all so much for being with us. So long, everyone.